of every state is the education of its youth. Dear participants, dear colleagues, welcome to the first panel of the fourth day of the International Youth Conference. Hashtag IYCKR 2017. Mobilize this. We're gathered here on the conference with a motto, European Values for the Future of Southeast European Countries. One of the core values is the value of democracy, something that we're seeing, unfortunately, somewhat under threat in many of our European countries. And I believe it's important to remind ourselves, as I opened this panel with a quote from Diogenes, I think, a biographer of Greek philosophers, ancient Greek philosophers, that already then, when the first outlines of democracy were being established, these philosophers were quite aware that democracy in a good form cannot exist without an educated demos, an educated people. So this brings us to the beginning of our panel, Education in Action, where I'm incredibly delighted to welcome our three distinguished speakers. I will begin with simply outlining that their experience and engagement are far too excessive for me to mention in this brief introduction, so I welcome you, if you haven't done this already, to read up on them in the conference brochures that you have, but I will briefly present them. First, on my left, we are privileged to have with us Mr. Dayo Okewale from the United Kingdom. He's the managing director and founder of We've Got Game, as well as the current chief of staff in the House of Lords in the UK. More about him you can read in the pamphlets. Our second colleague, our distinguished speaker, Professor Mimoza Ristova from University St. Cyril and Methodios in Skopje, also dedicated scholar, researcher, and human rights activist. Also on her, I would encourage you to read up on more in your brochures. And our third distinguished panelist, I'm very pleased to welcome here, Ms. Magi Nazar from Bulgaria. She's also a youth activist, a founder of the Immersion Academy in Bulgaria, and also an active human rights activist and an innovator in the realm of social change. So, dear panelists, I thank you for being here with us. As you know, the format is they will present their speeches, they will outline some thoughts that they would like to share with us, and then we will open the floor for Q&A. I would invite first Ms. Magi Nazar to begin with her perspective and approach from the field of civic education and innovation from this perspective. Please.
Can you hear me now? Almost. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for having me on this panel today. I'd like to start my speech by sharing with you a bit about myself and my educational experience, and then I'm going to give a little bit of a sociological background of education, the way I see it, and then tell you more about Immersion Academy and some practical takeouts that you can take to your communities and that I think will be valuable in revolutionizing education in our region. I was born in a poor neighborhood on the outskirts of Sofia. My younger brother and I were raised by our mother alone, who, albeit educated as a nurse, worked several jobs to provide for us. Despite this, we suffered through many lengthy episodes when we were so poor, our neighbors had to give us food. Although I started working at 15 as a cleaner of rich people's homes and was pressured by constant financial struggle until recently, poverty does not define my life and my education. Privilege does. What privilege, you may ask? I was lucky to have a mother who valued education deeply, who read to me before I could even speak and spent all her time helping me get ready for school, and who always expected the best from me. This meant I learned to read and write before I even went to school. where my primary teacher always praised me in front of classmates and fellow teachers. Later, my teachers volunteered to tutor me in preparation for high school exams. When I set off to create fundraising initiatives in 3rd grade or start a nonprofit in high school, the adults around me supported me. When years later, I decided to apply to colleges in the US and wanted to go to Harvard, everyone told me I could do it. Turns out I couldn't. I used to think that my achievements and my success were the fruits of my acute intelligence, hard work, and persistence. I was first challenged to reconsider how I think when a friend in college helped me realize that my success wasn't mine only. That the scholarship money I had received to study at the 4th best liberal arts college in the US probably came from the profits made through the exploitation of Chinese workers working their asses off for 14 plus hours a day for minimal pay. As I took my first class in sociology of education, I began looking at my experiences at school in Bulgaria through the prism of educational inequality. People like me are exceptions that simultaneously prove the rule and make it invisible. Poor people who gloriously manage to climb up the ladder of education and achieve social mobility serve to perpetuate the myth that if you work hard, you'll succeed. A myth created to mask the reality of social inequality legitimized and naturalized in the classroom. I continued to think about and study social inequality for the rest of my time in college. I studied at a US college where more students came from the top 1% of the income distribution than the bottom 60%. More students came from the top 1% of the income distribution than the bottom 60%. This really helped put things into a global perspective for me. I started seeing inequality not only in who gets to study where and what resources are allocated to them, but also how and what they're taught. You see, not all schools are created equal, to paraphrase Orwell's immortal words. Most schools have an invisible agenda, what sociologists call the hidden curriculum. They aim to shape working class and low-income population of a country into obedience and to prepare them for their role in society. As scholars Whitty and Young write in 1976, what pupils learn in school is not primarily the overt curriculum of subjects like French and biology, but values and beliefs such as conformity, knowing one's place, waiting one's turn, competitiveness, and difference for authority. The hidden curriculum teaches pupils the way life is, and that education is something that is done to them, rather than something that they do. Now, there is plenty of research that has documented and analyzed that phenomenon in various parts of the world, but let's briefly discuss how this played out during my own schooling in Bulgaria. The first school I attended from 1st to 7th grade was a neighborhood school off the performance charts, on the periphery of Sofia, where most students were lower or middle class. There, as dare I say, in most schools in Bulgaria, you could pass with high grades as long as you showed up and weren't a troublemaker. In comparison, the high school I went to was one of the topmost elite high schools in Bulgaria. Most of its students were middle or upper class sons and daughters of businessmen, university professors, and other types of well-educated public figures. The school had many problems of its own, but was quite honest about its mission to create the intellectual elite of Bulgaria. And that was clearly reflected in how we were taught. There, our teachers talked to us with utmost respect, calling us by our surnames, giving us freedom to choose at least some of our assignments, and paying attention to regularly provide us with opportunities for creative work and expression. While in most schools, talking back or challenging the authority of the teacher was seen as disrespect, in ours, it was welcomed as long as you could provide good argumentation that showed critical thinking. When it came to discipline, instead of calling your parents or punishing you, administrators would sit down with you and discuss your behavior, believing in your ability to change your ways. As you can see, the two schools I briefly sketched had quite opposite approaches in the way they taught and disciplined their students. The first, which represents most of the schools in Bulgaria, acted to create obedient, disciplined students who would join the labor force with appropriate attitude and basic skills. They would not protest against not having any say about what happens at the workplace, nor receive intrinsic motivation from their work because they consider this the norm. My classmates and I, on the other hand, were taught to think that we were the ones who will be in charge of society one day. It wasn't merely enough for us to show on time and be passive recipients of knowledge. Our future roles of managers and bureaucrats required that we were raised as creative, independent, and critical thinkers who are not afraid to challenge authority and do so in the right ways. The hidden curriculum of school maintains, reproduces, and legitimizes social inequality and immobility. It teaches people subordination and hierarchy, which some argue was the explicit function of education originally. Yet, all of this is hidden behind an official promise for equal opportunity and meritocracy. Now, I've talked about privilege and poverty, the hidden curriculum, and fake meritocracy. But what is it that we can do, and how do we do it? I founded Immersion Academy Bulgaria as a response to the lack of innovation in foreign language teaching and as a way to use foreign language as a platform to develop critical thinking. Immersion Academy was a full immersion program that took place in July in a mountain resort in Bulgaria. 24 youth aged 14-25 partook in Immersion Academy for its full duration of 18 days, while 2 groups of 9 adult learners each joined the program for 7 or 9 days, respectively. A major accomplishment for the Academy from the start was the fact that it brought together a uniquely diverse group of participants. Learners came from over 25 locations in Bulgaria, represented several minority groups, had different faiths, languages, and interests. The program also welcomed a group of free Syrian refugees, a young person in a wheelchair who had previously been refused access to education, and an intersex activist. The Academy had 3 main goals. First, we strived to create an engaging learning environment in which participants would significantly improve their English proficiency skills by communicating entirely in English and having native speaker facilitators. Second, we aim to support the development of critical thinking skills by modeling how to evaluate ideas and question one's own thinking, as well as how to consider different perspectives, access and evaluate information, and create and communicate effective arguments. Third, we wanted to support our participants in their process of self-improvement and promote the ideal of active citizenship and change-making through diverse forms of leadership, not just a particular type of leadership. This is important. So now I have 3 questions that I wanted to briefly discuss and that I think are important in thinking about how we can innovate in education. The first question is, what can be done to make sure students don't hate school, or how to make schools less oppressive? Our educational philosophy, based on the work of Brazilian educator Paulo Freire, was based on the idea that learning is a collective effort. When quality learning happens, all participants in the learning process are changed, teachers and students alike. To that end, our team abandoned the traditional hierarchy between teachers and students. Instead, we had facilitators and participants. The difference here is not merely linguistic. In our educational process, participants were responsible for their own learning and had a major role in shaping what happens in each class, what topics get to be discussed. Facilitators were merely more experienced learners who provided guidance and targeted support to on both individual and group level. That resulted in very high participation as well as student engagement and empowerment. Our youth and adult participants took ownership of their learning. And towards the end of the program, some groups were entirely led by participants instead of facilitators, which was a great accomplishment. Once they felt comfortable with our untypical classroom culture, participants took turns acting as facilitators themselves, leading discussions and offering media resources and exercises for their groups to collectively reflect on. The lack of hierarchy played out positively outside of the classroom too, whereby our adult learners reporting being fascinated by how much they had learned from the youth. A way we stimulated this peer-to-peer and intergenerational learning was by structuring time for participant-led workshops, as we called them. So every day, we had several interest-based workshops led by participants, which also offered another platform for leadership development. Workshops ranged from yoga, drama, sports, to Lady Gaga dance workshops, bracelet making, twerking for beginners, Kurdish folk dance, and more. Here again, we wanted to celebrate each individual's talents and skills, as well as our community's diversity. Then the second question I want to raise is there space for freedom in education? You can already see how we made space for freedom by removing hierarchy in the classroom and allowing our participants to be in charge of the curriculum. In the last week of the 18-day youth program, our participants worked on producing final projects that reflect their learning. They were asked to select an issue of their interest, research it, and design some kind of an intervention. They had freedom to decide on the topics and format of their presentations, but were given guidelines to ensure all projects met some basic criteria for critical thought and design thinking, which they had already gotten practice through previous projects during the program. It was absolutely amazing to see the diversity of projects, the creativity, and the commitment of participants who worked late into the night for several days prior to sharing their work with their peers. And then the next question for me would be, how can students quit being students and become lifelong learners? So I visited a classroom at a language high school in Sofia around Christmas to present Immersion Academy to students and get their feedback. I asked 11th graders to tell me about their interests. What do you care about? With few exceptions, the 17-year-olds could hardly name a single interest or passion they held. They were so bored, so demotivated, it was as if life was sucked out of them. For many high school students you meet in Bulgaria, learning is like a dirty word that they want nothing to do with. They are so traumatized by their experience in school and by being viewed as objects that they're ready to do anything but stay at school. Even the high-performing students pretty much hate school because they feel they're held back or miss sharing their excitement for learning with their peers. People are naturally inquisitive though. Every child has a deep thirst for learning and exploration. So to me, if school does one single thing, it should be to create and nurture a love for learning and not to kill it. Think about it, if technology allows us to have access to as much information as it does, the value of schooling is no longer in the transmission of facts and information. Instead, the value of education to me is in teaching young people how to learn and think critically. Our team had a training for 40 teachers at my first school and mostly talked about the importance of teaching critical thinking. This idea was very alien to the teachers present. They kept asking us how they can teach critical thinking when they had so much material to cover already. Just teach students to ask questions. Why did this event happen? How does this math principle relate to other things I already know? Why should I even care? Research shows that students retain information longer if they make connections, if their learning is relevant to them. During Immersion Academy, one of our groups watched and discussed music videos during a lot of their class time. Participants selected their favorite American pop songs, which they would listen to with subtitles, and be uncritical to the messages of the video and lyrics at the beginning. But then the facilitator would ask them open questions, guiding them to critically examine the content and its persuasive power. And gradually, participants would begin noticing things by themselves and develop the language to talk about it. Why this pedagogic example is so great in my opinion is that first, students have freedom. Second, the learning process is fun and relevant to them. This is really important because it destroys the notion that learning is something that only happens in the classroom, only when you're at school. And third, they gradually develop their thinking with the scaffolding of the facilitator. They acquire transferable skills that they can apply in other situations too. And last, I want to discuss how can education contribute to peace. Our project was based on our understanding that a lack of war does not entail peace. Peace cannot be present where some opinions and life experiences are legitimized, while others rendered invisible or prosecuted. In the short term, the transformative experience of attending our academy helped our participants to gain skills and confidence to connect, learn, and work with a diverse group of peers. to take responsibility for their own learning and actions, as well as to respectfully listen and share different perspectives. Additionally, the program challenged youth and adults alike to critically assess their prejudices towards others, practice empathy, and approach social issues creatively and critically. We believe that these, together with other skills and qualities developed through our curriculum, are critical to peace in the multicultural world we live in. Moreover, our project contributed to peace in the long term by showcasing that it is possible to create egalitarian, democratic, non-hierarchical, and non-homogeneous learning and residential communities. As I hope I've managed to convince you, Immersion Academy wasn't merely a language school. It was what one participant called a school of life. And I think all schools should be that. Thank you.
How can we innovate in education? Is there space for freedom in education? How can students quit being students and become lifelong learners? Some of the questions that Maggie opened, and I'm sure many questions are also popping up in your minds. So as the panelists make their presentations, I would encourage you to write them down, not to forget them, and open them later in the Q&A. Thank you, Maggie, for your presentation. And I'm honored and pleased to welcome on the stage now our dear colleague from the United Kingdom, Mr. Dayo Okewale. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. How you guys doing? Good? Okay. Old? This is a youth conference. How you guys doing? Amazing, amazing. So, I have a limited amount of time to speak about a topic I'm very passionate about. So I need your full cooperation. Can we get a presentation up? And for everyone that's asking, my name isn't Okiwale Dayo, as it is on the brochure and flyer. It's Dayo Okiwale. And and also the basketball company I run is called Who's Got Game. But we'll go into more detail on that. I'm a motivated and passionate believer that everybody deserves an education. And education is going to be our social and economic driver for this generation and the next generation to come. So I'm going to give a brief background on the global perspective at the moment on our current educational position, and then I'll speak about what I currently do in education, and then we'll see where we go from there. First, let me introduce myself to those that don't know me. So I'm managing director and founder of Who's Got Game. It's a basketball charity which uses basketball as a tool for social change and development. I'll speak more in detail about that. I'm also a chief of staff at the House of Lords, which is the upper house in Parliament, not the House of Commons, where Theresa Dismay lives. I also am an expert trainer for ISCA, which is the International Sport and Culture Association, and an associate fellow for the Commonwealth. I used to be a professional basketball player once upon a time in England and Germany, and I'm a foodie, so I love food, and yeah. But anyway, so in perspective, you know, SDG 4, one of my favorite SDGs, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. For those obviously who don't know, the SDGs were formed by the UN member states to govern their political and country agendas for 2030 and to eradicate poverty. But what's been happening currently, US aid since 2010 has gone down from 4% to 12 billion to undeveloped countries. And what that basically means is our funding for education is down, which means we're not producing as many literate individuals in the world. Let me give you some more stats here. Let me look at it here so I can see properly. So, if we go look at number 3, if current trends in schooling continue, 1.5 billion adults will have no education beyond primary school in 2030. So economically, this puts the country down by 23% in 4 years. There's 758 million adults that are illiterate in this world today. So basically, who don't have an education higher than a primary school individual. Illiteracy costs per year the world $1 trillion. That's what literally it costs us. There are 600 million young people without productive employment. That's going to go up to 800 million by 2030. 40% of the youth unemployment rate in most OECD countries, including Italy, Spain, Greece, and 40% of public employers claim that they lack to find people with the proper skills to employ. So we have a problem here. We have a huge problem. And conventional ways of education are not working. It was great to hear the first speaker speak about, okay, how can we make education more fun, more engaging? And this is where I come in. Let's show the video. Two.
Today I'm going back to school, Enfield Grammar School to be precise, and I'm here to get the answer to one very important question. Who's got game? Let's find out.
Who's Got Game is all about young people and the life lessons they can learn through sport. And who better to tell us all about it than someone who's benefited from it firsthand.
So I guess Who's Got Game is a corporation that just aims to really cause a change through sport. Asking that question, who's got game? Making people have the confidence to say, yeah, I do, put up their hand and say, I'm ready to play, I'm not scared of anything. Stay with me, head up. There's different things that you guys are good at, right? If you go into life and you go into a workplace, whatever, you need to know your strengths and your weaknesses. Sports help you to develop that. That's nice. Jacob, it needs to be higher. The ball needs to be higher. Shoot. Don't be under pressure. Let's go. 20 seconds. All we're doing is we're using different basketball drills, different basketball activities to enforce discipline, team effort, unity, and confidence. And what we'll do is we'll say, okay, once someone misses a shot, you clap once. If they score it, you clap twice. And the main thing is to get them to encourage no matter what happens, no matter the outcome, so that they don't lose faith or lose focus. Because we've built them up to kind of be one, as soon as we get into the game settings, their focus is to help each other. No one goes for glory, no one wants to show off, they just want to get the work done. There you go. Nicely. Keep your head up. Nice job. Let's speed it up. Let's go. Good passes.
A lot of kids after our program, some of them have got scholarships into other universities and colleges through basketball. Some who are not as skilled, put it on their CV. Projects like this just give them an opportunity to envision a better future. Feel comfortable for free. As much energy as you can. That sign put that energy into boundaries as well?
Yeah, the lessons he's trying to teach us, yeah, they're good, and I think that they'll benefit us in the future. Because when you're enjoying yourself, it brings up your self-confidence and stuff like that.
I'm trying to get my scholarships to go play in America. To be the best, you got to beat the best, isn't it? So I'm just training to become a better basketball player, as a better person as well, and a better teammate. That's the main thing.
Through life, you need to know what your skills are. And by playing a sport, you understand that. Like, you know what your strengths are and your weaknesses are. And that helps you later on in life, like when you're applying for a job or an apprenticeship or something like that.
Youth Got Game should go global. Think about it, because basketball is a language, I think. And when you bring out basketball, everyone wants to play with you. One thing I learned from Youth Got Game is you can do anything you put your mind to. Just be disciplined and work hard at it, and have the drive enough to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to score this basket, I'm going to make it happen, I'm going to get these grades in school, I'm going to go to this university, I'm going to make it happen.
Well, I'm certainly impressed with all of you here today, but we still haven't answered that question. Who's got game?
So that was taken maybe 4 years ago, and since then, if you go back to the presentation, some technical difficulties. So, Who's Got Game? Founded in 2008. It's an organization that uses basketball as a tool for social change and development. And what that means is we use basketball simulator drills to educate, and not just on a social competency level, but on a grammatic level as well. So we teach maths, geography, numeracy, human rights, social advocacy, whatever's necessary. We're currently in 170 schools UK-wide, 3 in North America at the moment, and we have programs all over Europe and Africa. We have a corporate strand, so we get corporate partners involved who are heavily invested because they believe sport in particular gives skills and quality mindsets that they don't find in other people. A recent survey found that people that play competitive sport in university earn up to 15,000 pounds more than those that don't. So sport is a powerful engagement tool for us. The whole education through sport model, in a sentence, is a pedagogical approach that uses sport and physical activity as a vehicle to spread a set of values, to develop specific competencies which can improve different fields in of life. Education through sport helps to enhance social, cultural, moral, ethical competencies to provide changes at personal, professional and social levels. So on the left you can see, faintly see a diagram I have which shows the difference for an education for sport, by sport and through sport. And education through sport is a more holistic teaching method which prepares people for active citizenship. And on the right you have Kolbe's learning life cycle. I mean, in essence, we just kind of need new strategies to learn. And sport definitely provides one. You know, I love this image from Albert Einstein. You know, everyone's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. And so, both from the sport level, from the private business level, we need to find innovative ways to educate and positively empower our young people. And that's it. I'm happy to answer questions. Those are a few of the sources, and I can send those to you later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Okewale, for introducing us to this wonderful non-formal learning platform, which uses sports as an innovative approach for encouragement and perhaps bringing people to a point of reflection of what kind of animal they are, and that any animal can be successful if it finds its environment in which it can thrive. With that, I would now shift the focus from one platform of education to a different, to one which I'm sure most of us are more familiarized, the formal realm and pillar of education, which serves as, I believe, a very important foundation for our societies to continue in the process of development. Professor Mimoza Ristova, you have the floor. Thank you.
Most of the text is unreadable because of the roughness of the screen. Could I have my presentation? We see. Oh, it's readable. Okay. Okay, I would like to draw your attention to the liaison between the research and higher education, and something is missing in my title here. I need to add that everything goes to the social and economical development. So, and there is a subtitle, University Autonomy Means Freedom of Research. This will be treated at the end of this presentation, because you will come up with a conclusion on your own with the progress of this presentation. So I should, how do I change slides here? It did, okay. Oh, I revealed a picture that I wasn't supposed to. Okay, what is the most important thing, the reason for which the wars are fought, the conflicts in the world are carried out? Do you know? No. Oil, okay. Oil. And this is the driver of the human society, dragging us in a good and bad. You know, this is very undesired pollutant also that increases the CO2 and the climate changes, and everything is because of oil. So this is our destiny. But the most important thing is not anymore the oil. We will have to show you the proof. This is, the knowledge is the new oil now. And we have the proof. Start proving this. Like, we have to compare South Korea versus Brazil with respect to the higher education level in the society. Let me show you first the chart representing the 2 years of comparison. Year 45, immediately after the Second World War, and the last year, 2016. At year after the war, both South Korea and Brazil have 2% of highly educated people in the population. This is negligible number. But nowadays, if we compare the last year numbers, it's 40, and Brazil is about 7%. I want to go to this chart next. This is how the countries are developing, and we need to compare, see, South Korea developed from about, those bars here are invisible, pertaining to 1960, because those were $150 GDP per capita for South Korea and $168 GDP per capita for Brazil. But those are visible. Unbelievable growth. It's about 100-folded growth for the period of 50-something years. And for Brazil also a considerable growth. So if we compare those two charts, we can see a relation. Istok is a specialist for statistics and for finding correlations between the parameters in the society, and you can see direct proportion here. See, the country developed because of the education. If you go to South Korea, I have never been, but I have spoken to people from, professors from there. They have not too many resources in the country. I mean, they don't have land for agriculture also. It's a small country in area and mountain country, but they found their ways out of the poverty. And the poverty was tremendous. I mean, I have spoken to people, my generation, that remember how poor they were in the ages when they were born. And I uncovered here one field to see what's happening to my country. And I'm ashamed. This is two-folded growth in the same period of time, between 60 and 16. When the countries have grown their GDP per capita for 100 times, we have barely managed to double the number. And I don't have the numbers for education, but they are severe, just similar to South Korea. We have now 20. Starting with about 2%, we have reached about 20. I have no definite numbers. I'm sorry, because I don't have access to those numbers on internet. Higher education has to be also responsive to globalization processes, because now a single country now has prepared their students for just living locally in their environment. But we are preparing our students to live in the world. We are preparing for global migrations of people, because the market of European Union is opened for their members. We are hopefully becoming a member in the next period, so we have to prepare for global migrations. We have to prepare our students to resolve the global energy problems and the global climate changes, because the climate changes are not very localized phenomena. They are provoked and caused by different countries, and we are sharing the same consequences as the provokers and the reason why we are having the global climate change. To see how the higher education is valued, there are metrics developed to rank the universities. And I took not the Shanghai list, but the World University Ranking, which is similar to the Jiaotong University Ranking, but a little bit different in the metrics. And we have the top 10 here. If you see the example and study the numbers, you can make your own conclusions. What are the priorities of the higher education, and what are the parameters affecting the higher education and affecting the society in the countries where the higher education institutions are located. Like, see here, we have 1, 2, 3 of the university of top 10 are located in United Kingdom, 1 is in Switzerland, and the rest of 6 is in the United States. If you go to the Shanghai list, you have United States universities are the top 10. So that's why I switched to this kind of list, because we have a little bit diversity here. And if you go with to compare GDP with per capita in the UK institution, in the UK, you find 41,603, 52 for the USA, and amazing number of 88 almost $1,000 per capita in Switzerland. If you study the list of 500 top 200, I'm sorry, you don't find any country that have between the top 100 to 200 below 25,000, below 25,000. So we can make the conclusion that if you have a good GDP per capita, if you're a developed developed country, you have good universities, and vice versa. This is like a vicious circle. Education makes the GDP per capita, and the GDP per capita makes the education more qualitative and more and better. Also, I would like to point out that also the age of university is important. The tradition, if you have older universities, you are on the list. If you have newer universities, then you also have those in the United States which are from the 19th century. And in United Kingdom you have from the 11th century. The quality of the university is also ranked with the Nobel Prize laureates ranking list. And if you have more Nobel Prize, it's a simple formula with the World University Ranking, where you have a parameter to have to count the number of the Nobel Prize laureates, which is important. That will be shown in the next slide. And the science publications are the last in the column here. The importance of the number of science publications is because the humanity needs to start not from the beginning in each research, but to start from the point where the other researchers have stopped. So you will be a continuation of their efforts, of their intellectual efforts. And that's why the publications are needed to disperse, to disseminate the knowledge through the world, and the people continue not from the beginning, but to start from where other people have ended their work and their legacy in the intellectual property. So in the performance of ranking in scientific papers are very important. The World University's methodology is they are not counting just simply like numerical counting the number of publications, but also the value of publication is important. Some publications are really boosting other people's research, and they're bringing some novelties, some innovations, creative decisions that are changing the human society. And those have to be more valuable than just simple publications of something that doesn't impact on the human society. So research excellence means that the published scientific work is more valuable if there are many people who have continued from the point where you have stopped and have boosted in the field, like a vaccine have been boosted. The first vaccine have boosted the development of genetical vaccination research in the future 10 years, like hundreds of papers, thousands of papers have been produced after one single paper have provoked their research. I have to point out that there is an importance of each university to have a seed of science. You need to find a person. Seed is not a seed, seed for vegetables, but it's a human resource that you find one person to praise and to allow him create a group of researchers that will make the change and make the success. And this picture here shows you Cavendish Laboratory at Cambridge, 1891, and the central figure here circulated is a J.J. Thomson. The person, anybody knows who is J.J. Thomson? Okay, nobody. He's the discoverer of the electron. If the electron wasn't discovered, we wouldn't be electrified yet. He made the experiment who proved the presence and the charge and the mass of the electron that provoked a boost in the electromagnetism, in the electronics, in the IT technology. We are now aware that we are picking the fruits of the seeds that were seeded by J.J. Thomson. So my word is that this person here at the Cambridge laboratory, at Cavendish laboratory, this person here is important because he created 7 other Nobel laureates of his students, of his PhD students. I cannot identify them who are the 7. Only this one is, I can recognize this face, Rutherford. He's in the nuclear physics, important person. Those figures here have boosted the research worldwide. So they are pioneers in the research in a certain area in the electromagnetism and nuclear physics. And then we have also, I would like to point you to the Zurich Technology Institute, which was on the list number 9 here. So nobody probably knows about this school, right? Everybody knows Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, and the Ivy League in the United States. Anybody heard about ETH Zurich? Okay, thank you. This school is very known for how this school developed and made the climb on the list. Actually, they made the climb year 1945 when they allowed, actually not 1945 is another period of this university. 1870, 1/3 are Swiss citizens. They have opened the doors for the students from Europe. They have opened widely the doors because they didn't charge scholarship, and the state was supporting 66% of the students and gave the chance for 66% of equal opportunity to all that were interested, and they have that have shown some good results in the secondary education. So this school is also known by Albert Einstein. This is his alma mater, and his wife, lovely wife, Serbian wife, Mileva Maric, they were both students to this school. I would like to draw your attention to national laboratories' importance in the development of the higher educations, because we cannot disconnect research from higher education. In many countries in the world you have national laboratories, but not in our country here. National laboratories are institutions where investigators and technicians are employed, equipment is provided, and a state budget is attributed every year to maintain the basic research. The basic research which serves to the strategies of the state. Like they have a strategy to develop the nuclear physics, and they have Open Manhattan Project, which is a Fermilab, nowadays Fermilab. So this is dedicated to some certain platform in developing the country. Other laboratories, Bell laboratories, were opened in the United States because they wanted to serve to the country to get rid of the tubes, electric tubes, but to develop a transistor. So Bell Laboratories. Berkeley Laboratory was established to serve to the society as well. So national laboratories are designed to have their own research to the country, but also they are designed to have public universities related in their research and private universities related to their research, and using the resources of the laboratories. So the country will save some money, not to disperse the capacities to everywhere, to each university, but to have one single capacity to be economically and used by all the resources. I would like to point out that Macedonia didn't have that kind of happiness to be part of those share of national laboratories. When Yugoslavia descended, the 3 existing laboratories remained outside the borders, so we don't have any of those laboratories, and we need to form them. Those laboratories remained in Belgrade, Croatia, and Ljubljana. Here is the ranking of those universities, just to show you, according to the list that was aforementioned. The Shanghai list shows a little bit better placement of those universities, but just to show you where we are, the rest of Yugoslavia that remained without national laboratories is the list here. It's a shameful list. I mean, I don't know how to help the country, but to tell the politicians that we need to establish national laboratories and to overcome this problem, because the countries that have national laboratories and use economically the capacities and the budgets for research, they have good placement of their on the lists. Okay, this is just a consolation. My university is this, but the other universities for my country are terrible. Way out. Yeah, I look the way out, become part of a European research area, consolidate resources, infrastructures in one single research institute, which will be supported by the state. If the state finds out that the development of the country is related directly to the research and to the higher education, they will start thinking about changing their policy about financing the higher education and research. Increase the budget for research. Europe tends to 2%, and we are 0.2%. I mean, we have to have tenfold increase from the GDP per capita to be something competitive and become part of the European research. And the last point was relate to industry. But we don't have any industry here in Macedonia. I don't know about you have all different experiences. And the last slide shows how we are going to finally enjoy the autonomy of research. And what does it mean, autonomy in research? That means you can take care for research of the ideas that are products of your intellectual analysis, and you are not suppressed by the society to do certain kind of research, but to do independent. And that will be possible to be enjoyed only if we have all those conditions, like in European Union you have budget for research, and the states have budgets for research, universities have budgets for research, and the industry is supporting customized for the industry kind of research. In United States you have more of those financing burdens here, and this is better. I think that's why the United States are better, because they are performing research for defense and research for Department of Energy. And the industry is more developed, the IT industry is more developed. So in the United States you have more research going on, and more universities are placed on the list, on the top of the list, just because you have more money. And if you have more money, you have the liberty to choose to dedicate part of your researching time to independent projects. Nobody will ask you at the university, what are you doing? If you have a budget to purchase everything you need for the research, and everything here is a budget, then you will steal some money from everything you have here, dedicate the money to your personal independent research. So autonomy means you're doing research related to the state, to the defense, to the university, related to the strategies of the country, but also you can do your own research and have the liberty to make changes. And if nobody believes in you, in your research, you believe in yourself, and you can come out with a discovery, maybe a landmark discovery in the future. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Mimosa, for introducing us and broadening our awareness of seeing education as this new oil, as you began your presentation, of the future. In fact, the fuel of our developing societies of the future. I'm sure throughout all of our three presenters, their presentations, there has been quite a lot of questions and thoughts, comments that emerged in all of you. So I think it's best that I don't take too much of the time as moderator and simply open the floor to your questions. I would suggest that we have 2 or 3 questions at a time, and then we leave time for the speakers to respond, and then we continue with the process. Yeah. So okay, we already have 1, 2, and the first 3, and then the next circle. Thank you.
Yeah. Works right now. Yeah. So thanks for the speeches, but I would directly like to refer to Mrs. Ristova, and I'm pretty much, to be honest, shocked by what you said, because you are most of the time focusing on the economizing of the education and of the prosperity of all the countries, and this is exactly not what we want to reach with education. You showed us like the Ivy Leagues, all the like Eurocentric universities, all that were reaching higher and higher and higher levels, and this totally excludes every persons that can't reach these positions and that then don't have the money. And this reproduces, again, a society that is reaching higher goals all the time, that is achieving oriented, and that always, it's always the same countries doing this, and that we all like focus on this development, without focusing on the chance of the same education and that everybody should have. And this is why I'm pretty much surprised, especially when you also referred to climate change, because climate change is most of the time also a problem because of the exploitation of resources, and when we go on with doing this, focusing on money, we will not lead to solve problems on a global, communal way.
Yep.
It's not a question, it was rather a comment.
Okay, so the first question is a comment for a later response. So thank you. And second, please.
Hello, my name is Helena. I wanted to agree what she said. I don't think that checking university rankings is the best idea, because most students are already selected by being the best students, plus it is basically like an elitist procedure, because they pay a lot of money in the UK and in the US, while in the EU actually most universities are for free. And my second, this is actually a question. I'm not really sure that we can also compare Brazil, which was colonized for 315 years, with South Korea, which was just for 35 years. And I would like to ask you if you don't think that colonization has a very big impact on all levels of education. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question in this round, and then already two emergent hands, actually 3 for the next round. Thank you. I saw you. 1, 2, 3. Here, Dilek.
Okay, hello.
No, I'm sorry. The girl was first here, but I have you in my mind for the second round. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. Also. Hello. You are hearing my voice, right? Okay. My name is Dilek. I'm from Turkey, and you mostly focus on other things about education, but I would like to ask something about the new technology and education. So, for example, we in our country, our government start a new project to share with all primary school students iPad. So this I have really I really don't know it's really good impact for the education. And so my question is that we should integrate the children with the new technology, so it can be great impact for the future, or we should not share. We should not actually we continue the old style education system. Well, yeah, maybe you have some evidence or you have some article you read that you can share some information for the new technology and its impact on the education system. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I suggest that for now we conclude this round of questions. And the third question, just to check, is, if I understood you correctly, directed to all the speakers to share their comment. Wonderful. Okay. So, Professor Mimosa, would you like to start with the first? And thank you.
People were shocked of the numbers, or people were shocked of me presenting those numbers, the facts? Am I a carrier of those, creator of those numbers, or am I just a messenger who doesn't want to be killed because of he's bringing the message to you? So I'm just presenting the facts. And the reason why I'm presenting Brazil and Korea, because the World Bank is presenting, if you go to the World Bank website, you have the success stories of development, and this is the subject that I have taken from the World Bank. It is not my comparison. I'm borrowing the things. I'm a researcher in solar energy. You can ask me as much as you want about solar energy, about converters, about the mission in Mars, which is planned, and the energy resources are planned for there. But those things I'm borrowing from other people, so the ranking list is not mine. About the colonization, I really don't know the facts. I'm sorry, I cannot. It is important to strike out that the wars are very influential on the development, underdevelopment. Like if you follow, I was following the number of publications from all the ex-Yugoslav republics, which are independent countries now, and I was following that there was a discontinuity and a flat part in the graph in Bosnia, and in Croatia, in Slovenia a little bit. Where was a war, there was stagnation in the number of publications, which is a miracle measure for the development of the science in one country. We don't have any other measure but to measure by number of patents, number of publications, and that. About the question about using iPads in schools, that's a huge debate here in Macedonia. The previous government introduced not the iPads exactly, but tablets, other brands of tablets, introduced them into the schools. There was a huge debate because the best educational primary school system is Finland, and they forbid this kind of use and introduction of iPads or any other tablets in the school system. So it is not allowed. They're just working with their hands, calculating by their hands, they're crafting the stuff with their hands, performing the experiments. But this is a highly developed and higher educated country in the scale in Europe. So they understood that the most important is the psychomechanical work. Like when the hands are working, then the brain is consuming and memorizing better than when the eyes are reading. So this is a fact which is proven in the science. So I disagree with those countries who are introducing, because the best example, if you go research and you go to the success stories, you see Finland children are the highest rated children in the knowledge, in general knowledge, in generic knowledge, when they're tested on the standardized tests developed by the European Union, and they are best, so why don't we learn from them? And no, we are learning from the business society who wants to make a profit out of that business, importing some tools and selling them and becoming rich out of.
Okay. I would like to invite now the other two speakers to share their views, their comments on the new technologies as well. You can go in line. The fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4. if that's okay. Yeah, perfect. Thanks. Eminem.
It's on? Yes. Check mic. You guys hear me? Yeah, context is important. And so I'll give you an example. The Vodafone Foundation in 2013 partnered with the Qatar Foundation and an Italian NGO to start the first instant networking school in the DRC, so Congo in Africa. And it started the first instant networking school for 400 to 500 children in refugee camps. So they received tablets, and now they're able to receive education in a remote village and in a place where they had no other option. So in that context, of course, you know, receiving tablets, using technology for this instance is necessary. I think contextually what happens is with the advancement of technology, if you are not equipped to use that technology correctly, it could stunt you in later life. And what I mean is, if, for example, you can only write in 140 characters instead of grammatically correct sentences, that doesn't benefit you, or it doesn't make you literate. So I think everything is contextually, has to be put in context. I don't think you can outrightly say technology has no use or benefit to education, or it's a bad thing. Businesses, yes, they want to make profit, but also businesses like the Vodafone Foundation and KPMG, who have a dedicated lifelong literacy plan. Some businesses have a citizenship focus because empowering people through education is good for business and it's good for their economy. I mean, it's very simple. You can do business and be socially good at the same time. There are 171 people right now who have no education, who could be alleviated out of poverty with education. I mean, these are practical things, and technology can aid in this.
I have several thoughts on the subject of using technology in education. I think going back to what I was talking about in my speech, and making education relevant, there's, you know, like, technology is so relevant in our daily life, and, you know, like how we communicate with the world and gather information, that there's really like a dire need for education to acknowledge this and to introduce, to use more technology in the classroom. I think some challenges to that are the lack of, at least, you know, like in Bulgaria, there's, we have like a lot of organizations talking about that. The one coming in mind is the Software University in Sofia, which is actively working on, you know, like making programming and, you know, like computer education more accessible. So they've raised, you know, like the issue of not having teachers who are highly educated and capable of programming. So like you have teachers at school who do not, you know, like their students know more than them, and that's something that we can work with in a lot of different ways. Some research that I've read on the subject is how, specifically speaking about freedom in education, and I define freedom as the opportunity for students to have choice and also to participate actively in the design and implementation of curriculum. So there's a lot of like good practices from the United States and other countries where the fact that students are perhaps more knowledgeable than a lot of elders about technology has been celebrated through, and there are a lot of schools who actually allow students to teach their teachers through workshops and other projects like that, or to teach their peers. So I think that's also something that like we can think creatively about how to bridge this gap between perhaps like the older generation of teachers not having the skill set. And another example that like came to my mind was about SOLA, which some of you may have heard. There's a very popular TED Talk. I'm forgetting the name of the speaker. And I'm giving it as an example again because I remember like the most striking takeout from this TED Talk is how the organization put computers in rural villages in Africa and just let, you know, like kids play with the computers and find, you know, like find out how to use them, start like doing their own research. And they found incredible results in terms of, you know, like kids learning English through, you know, like just this computer that was given to them. So having this access, I think, is very important, and thinking creatively about ways to utilize that. And my last point would be about, again, remembering that introducing technology into the classroom or you know, like acknowledging the importance of technology should also come with critical thinking and developing youth capacities for critical thinking and critical use of this technology. Thank you.
Okay. For now, for this round of questions, we already have the three hands from before. So for those of you new, please keep in mind, and also Nemanja is right after them. But as we stand, I would like to use my moderator power to return us slightly to the first comment that was made. As someone later on today moderating the session, Retaining Talent in Southeast Europe, I would like to return us to the comment that was made to your speech, Professor Hristova. The narrative that you presented of the Ivy League and those universities, what would be the message that you wanted to convey to this public in terms of what is the important thing to be in the awareness of young people in the Southeast European region with respect to those to this status quo, and particularly in terms of what can they do as without this encouragement of a brain drain, but rather within our context of this region. To formulate a bit that comment into a little bit of a question, I hope it's okay with our colleague.
I don't think I had a particular idea. Sometimes you are presenting the facts and you are making the audience to make the conclusions. It's just like on the TV news. You have the presenter giving you the facts and you are making the conclusions. I am not advocating that the Ivy League is the best. I also know that the social segregation in the education, the world of education, especially the higher education in the United States, is terrible. I have been part of that education twice. Actually, I was twice a visiting professor at 2 universities, all ranked between 21st. So I have noticed that difference, and I am aware. But also I am aware that those guys there, no matter how restrictive and selective they are, and discriminative they are in their choices, in their financing, in every aspect, those guys are making the progress in the world. So let's say Stanford. Nobody of you, I hope, hasn't studied at Stanford or even thought about, because that's a private university ranked number 6, I think, or 4. I don't know which was the position. And not a living child which has a millionaire father and mother is able to study there. But there was one girl from Macedonia who managed to join that medical school of Stanford after completing the pre-med in different universities. I mean, it's always a chance for extreme brains and talents to find a way to be recognized in one of those institutions. So my point is, excellency is everywhere appreciated, even in those discriminating Ivy League universities. I mean, if you are really good in one aspect of your studying, you will come on the surface and you will become top 5 or top 1% of that university. So I think there are many, many examples that have proven that.
I just want to, I want to disagree with you as someone who has studied like most recently in the United States and who has gone through, you know, like the application process. I mentioned during my speech that I applied to Harvard. I wasn't accepted, but then I applied to other universities and went to the fourth best liberal arts college in the States. I want to, I think that like it's actually damaging to say that, you know, like these are places where, you know, like geniuses go, because that's not the case. And that's what I was trying to get at in my speech, that these are places where like absolute like normal people just like us, you know, like go, and you don't even have, you know, you don't have to be a genius to go to these places. And knowing, you know, like a lot of people who studied in the States from Bulgaria, in many cases these are, you know, like the students who go to private schools, like the American College in Bulgaria, the Anglo-American like international school, and so on. There are fewer people who go to American universities, who are not going to these like select few schools, but it's still possible, and there are many cases. And I think that it's rather, the problem is rather knowledge that, you know, like Harvard is not, you know, like an impossibility, that, you know, like if you have good grades, if you've been active, you know, like in your community, and have, you know, like searched for ways to contribute and to develop yourself, like you have a chance to attend one of these schools. So I just wanted to comment on that, and thanks.
One more comment, and then we will go to questions, I promise.
Again, I think context is so important, and you know, back to my last slide, that, you know, there are many ways, and we need to seek many, you know, new strategies. From my personal story, so when I was 14, I lived in a very disadvantaged part of East London. Terrible. Most of my friends carried guns or died or in jail, whatever the case was. And you know, I managed to play basketball, get a scholarship to one of the top UK universities, and, you know, play professional basketball. That was my journey. So I mean, everyone has a different path, and many will go the private school route, many will go the Ivy League route, many won't. But I do believe we need to seek further routes of education, because currently what's happening is we have a world that's illiterate, and many are not going to achieve a private route. So we must empower those who are not to be the forerunners of this world. And so, you know, we have a distrust for government at this moment in time. We have a distrust for people that actually go to these Ivy League schools, because these places don't necessarily produce character, integrity, or any of the great qualities that we need for a new revolution. So that's just my 2 points.
Okay, now we will go to 1, 2, 3, the three questions, then Nemanja, and then we'll open for another round later. I saw it. Okay, could you please get the microphone back to our gentleman from Dallas, I think, and then the second and third there. The hidden microphone. Oh, you already have it. Oh, we'll do this round. Don't worry. Oh,
can you? All right. Professor, I have 2 comments and 1 question. One question for Mr. Okevele-Dayo, and 1 comment, Professor Ristova. With all due respect, I went to Columbia. I went to an Ivy League school, and I went straight from refugee camp. I was a refugee. My status was a refugee in United States. My dad was a POW, prisoner of war. It is absolutely bogus what I just heard. It is the best education that you can get, okay? I recommend everyone to apply to the best schools in the world. If you need any help applying, come and see me. That's number one. Number two, once you do get education outside, your job, if you choose to do so, is to come back and improve education here so that it can resemble that type of education over there. So with all due respect, Professor, you know, some of my best friends were Europeans. My class was 60-50. 50% were international people. There's absolutely no discrimination. That's number one. Number two, Okevele Dayo, is it a little bit Nigerian descent?
It's Dayo Okewale.
Dayo Okewale. My college roommate was Nigerian. These it's amazing. This is they're all about education. Okoro, my roommate, he's a Harvard graduate. He went to medical school at Harvard. Both of his brothers, Princeton and Harvard as well. Just a sort of side note, very serious about education. I want to just make a small observation. I do have glasses, so take this with a grain of salt. I didn't see any girls in the video, and kind of scratched my visions. That could have been just the way it was made. I'm a coach myself. I coach little girls soccer at YMCA in Dallas, and I also coach boys basketball as well. I'm known as a Coach Goran. I tend to think of myself as a good coach. It is very difficult to, when we talk about traditional societies, and I would just like to hear a recommendation from you. How would you mobilize girls in particular? It's always easy to get the guys playing sports in traditional societies such as the Balkans, Western Balkans, right? If you have any recommendations, and I do want to hear, how come I didn't see any girls in the video, so.
Okay, thank you. Our next two colleagues. Okay.
Okay. Is it working? Yeah. Thank you, finally. So first of all, thank you for your speeches. My name is Tale, and I'm from Macedonia. And I have two questions specifically to Ms. Ristova. You showed in your presentations that the connection between the GDP per capita and the number of highly educated students. But then again, when we think about Macedonia specifically, we can see that the number of universities in the past few years is increasing rapidly, and we still don't see any kind of change in the GDP per capita. So maybe, do you think that maybe the problem is in the quality instead of the quantity of educated people? And then there is another question which is specific to Macedonia, I guess. What's your opinion? Do you think we have a problem with dispersed studies, and how do you think we can solve the problem? Thank you.
Okay, we have one more question. You could,
Sorry. Yeah, it's working. So that's like the University of St. Kirill and Methodius, which is like based in Skopje, and then they open like different like sub-schools of the same university, which are in the smaller towns. So the best professors don't go to teach in the smaller towns, and the quality is really low. And it's basically the same diploma you get, but the knowledge is not the same.
Is it okay we take one more question from the behind? Yeah. And then the next one.
Yeah, okay. Loud and clear. Good afternoon, my name is Luca, and I come from Montenegro. I have a question for Professor, and I basically have two questions, but the first one goes with the chart we saw at the beginning about higher education, and the compared was South Korea and Brazil. And do you think maybe the increase in GDP and also in higher education has connection to some certain external factors regarding South Korea? And also I have a question for anyone who feels free to answer. Do you think, because we spoke about the universities and basically we spoke about the Western countries, do you think the money and free market really have a big impact on quality education? And regarding, because the first person in space was from Soviet Union, so North Korea, for example, has the technology or military technology which got like 2 or 3 countries in the world regarding the last tests, and also the first calculator, for example, was from USSR, and the calculators, as we all know, are quite useful today. So my question was do you think really that free market and capitalism push forward our knowledges and they really solve problem, or maybe it's not like that? Thank you.
Okay, for now we would end this round of questions. If you're okay, or would you? Yeah, I have you in mind for the next one. No worry. Okay. Are you okay with accepting one more comment?
It's using computers in the school, yeah.
Okay. Go, Nemanja, please, and then we'll wrap up. Please.
Yeah. Okay, it's supposed to be on. Okay, cool. Now, I wanted to say I have a lot of similarities with all of you. Like, I've been myself playing basketball for more than 10 years and teaching boys and girls, organizing also big summer camps in the mountain, all without like new technologies and Wi-Fi. But also, I'm working in the new technology field. I'm working in marketing field, when I can see whole changes that are happening daily, hourly. And also, like, I'm working a lot with social workers and kids and professors in the school, because I'm like official trainer of UNICEF in Serbia for education about digital violence in the schools. And what's important to say when you think about should we have new technologies in school or not? Like, the kids nowadays, they are basically thinking about whole in a lot different way than we are. 10 years ago, internet didn't exist, and we communicated in some other way. And it's not for us like strange to come back to that way of thinking without technologies. But kids, they don't know how to communicate in some other way, like belonging in a Facebook group and saying something and being excluded from that group. It's like something that's very important for them. And it's important to understand those things. Also, the examples from the Finland, when children are around there, it's very good. But technology should not be excluded. I think we should have both. Also, we have stories about big shots from technologies companies that are sending their kids to the school where there's no technology involved. Basically, it's a myth. Like, you can read it every day on the internet, but it's a fancy school when they said it for some other reasons. And I think it's just a matter how we use technology, not should we use it or not. Like in Serbia, in the strategy for the youth for the next 20 years, one of the biggest goals is having Wi-Fi in every school. I mean, in 20 years, just establishing having a Wi-Fi. It's like really ridiculous to have that in mind. Because we need to, basically what we need to do in the schools, it doesn't matter in which way we do it. But we need to teach children to think critically, what Maggie said, and we need to teach them how to empathize with people. I think those are basically the most important skills that they need to have. Technology is becoming so easy to use nowadays. They will figure it out very fast.
I have to.
I'm finishing.
Finish with the statement.
I'm finishing. Yeah. Then we need to do it very fast. And I want to ask you, how do you think we should develop critical thinking and empathy in the schools now, either way, using technology or without, or using both? Thanks.
You're okay with taking all the 4 questions? Would you like to start, Professor Ristova? I think Nemanja's question, did you have in mind for all the panelists to respond? Okay. So, but maybe we go from the first question onwards, from colleague from Dallas.
About the alumni from Columbia, I didn't get his name. I would like to respond to his point of view that he didn't feel any discrimination. I didn't mean the discrimination by being discriminated in the classroom, in the laboratory. I thought about the discrimination on the Ivy League in the Ivy League schools, so where you have the fraternities and sororities that have completely different life from other students. So this could be a part of your personal feelings. Not everybody feels the way you do. There are people who had no access to those parties, to those social life, social events. I'm talking about that. I'm just giving you an example. You feel when you are a student. I'm sorry.
This is extremely.
I'm sorry. Could I just intervene a bit? I'm sorry. I would like to, for now, to depersonalize these interactions, for us to focus on topics that are not one and other person's experiences, because otherwise we lose the greater context of the picture. So I would like to also to encourage our panelists to just reply to those personal experiences. I believe are welcome to be made as statements, but not to put us into a vis-a-vis personal dialogue.
Thank you.
So thank you.
And let's answer the question about so many universities in Macedonia. I have appeared in the media several times to disagree with all decisions of the previous government who particized the society and kidnapped the higher education actually to take position for themselves, professor positions who are not available anymore. They created universities in Macedonia, numerous universities to cover their ruling party desires to become part of the higher education, because it looked to them, everything was accessible to those guys, but the higher education positions. And now they created those higher education positions. I think in the future we have to discuss in merging those universities, because they show such a fearfully bad results in the ranking. We have to merge them to the better alma mater, like University of Kirill Methodi can accept other more universities to grow into a bigger university and disperse their studies. Like dispersed studies means the same conditions have to be provided as in the main mother university. So if you don't have the same conditions, the same opportunities, the same professors, the same laboratories, you shouldn't have them. Just bring those kids, give them stipends, give them equal opportunity to study, relieve them from the fees, and bring them to study in the capital city and learn also the culture and everything else. About the computers in the classroom, I may think like I'm an old grandmother who doesn't like technology, but no, I'm a technology freak. I'm carrying summer schools for robotics. I mean, I'm the top of the top in technology. I'm purchasing always the new gadgets, everything possible. So, but I'm talking about facts and metrics. The kids, according to the standardized tests in Finland, are not allowed to have laptops or iPads during the school hours, which are not pertain to IT technology. So if they carry on physics classes, they are having experiments. If they have chemistry classes, they are having chemical laboratory accessible. And in poor countries like Macedonia we developed a program for using the computers, and I have developed 2 practical books for grade 8 and grade 9. Every school that doesn't have a laboratory, there is a virtual laboratory that they can use. But that's for poor. And we are tending to become better than that, to have access to practical work, because this is the one that matters. Imagine one day, now we have twisters in the United States, and everywhere through the world we have 6 million people evacuated. Where is your iPad to show you what to do and to guide you through the ways? where? And imagine the climate changes will provoke more and more catastrophes in the world that will bring you to start from the scratch and not from the iPad. You will not learn from the iPad. You will learn from material that you have in your hands. So that's my answer.
Thank you. I would invite Maggie or Dio, which of you would like
Do you
to
have it?
start. And then
Context is important. But anyway, yeah, I'm not really going to touch that too much. I mean, yeah. Technology to me, yeah, I'm not going to touch it. So back to your point about developing critical thinking and empathy. So similarly, like sport, basketball, for example, or different non-formal education techniques, I would recommend, especially in environments where maybe technological things are more expensive. Definitely sport is a kind of cheaper way to handle that problem. So my friend from Colombia who challenged me on not having females in the video. No, it's a fair point, and it was that day they actually came down, and that was the first school that we entered in, and it was a kind of male-dominant school. So that's why. But we do have female participant programs. They're great. The numbers under 16 are 42%, which is really good. I think we tend to find, and I mean, you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, but we tend to find that when females get to a certain age, they become less engaged in taking part in physical activity. Not all, but then they become more engaged with becoming beautiful women. So it's like it's a transitional phase. Our numbers under 16 are very strong, very good, and then when puberty hits, I guess that seems to fizzle out. And also interesting about Nigeria. So yes, my name is from Nigerian descent, and I go to Nigeria at least 2 times a year to both give back in an educational capacity and also help out. And they are very hungry for education and very desperate for education. And I mean, in any capacity, way, shape, or form they can receive it, they'll be happy to. Interesting fact is, in 2050, Nigeria will have 9.8 billion people, more than the whole of the USA, just Nigeria. So.
I want to first respond to the question about Luca's question about money in the free market. I think that the free market could be a great driving force for development in some ways, but it's also oblivious to educational inequality. So if we want to think about, like how do we educate and teach not only, like the top 10% or top 5% and like the elite, but also like everyone, I think we need to look like beyond, like what the free market would inspire us to do. And then Nemonia's question about critical thinking and empathy, I really appreciate that you brought in like empathy because I think it's really, really important. And these are things that, like we can teach in the classroom, at school, not only, like through outside programs. And I work as a consultant for an educational foundation in Bulgaria. So we are developing like a lot of different materials to share with schools and support them in, making small steps, like to increase freedom in the classroom, to increase, like critical thinking and empathy. And some very simple ways, like you can do that. Some things like we've offered to teachers are, like you can start the day with like emotional check-in. So, like you like have the students in a circle, like everyone goes around and says, like what's present with them. And that's a way, like for the teacher to really know like where their students are at, and to be able, like to continue teaching, but knowing what's bothering or like what's on students' minds, and not just be like, not to continue this disconnect between, like teaching and, like students' emotional lives and lives outside of, like their identity as students. Gratitude circles are another way, like to raise empathy, to teach, like students the culture of seeing like other people's like strengths and recognizing them, and like giving credit to others. There are just very, very many small ways that like we can bring into the classroom and start like this journey of building more critical thinking, more empathy, and making this like a lifestyle, not just like some fancy addition to the curriculum. I also think that like for empathy, there like for us with like Immersion Academy, we started like from the beginning with a code of conduct that we agreed on collectively as a community, and made sure that like we followed up with. There's restorative justice is a very powerful opportunity for like not disciplining in the authoritative way. I think asking students to consider a different perspective is also very, very important, something that like you can do with every subject. Like some ideas I came up with just now are like to ask students to rewrite stories, or like do interviews with people that are different from them. So I think that like we have to be creative and just like be open to these ideas, to switching up things, to allowing like more voices, more experiences in the classroom.
Thank you. Staying where we're at and being reflective about it, we're quite on a time constraint, so I would really encourage the next few questions to be inquisitive, concise, and short. So we are, Gata, she was for a long time, and then Helena here, and then the next three, and then hopefully we'll have time for maybe a quick, short next round, or maybe just continue. Thank you. The speakers will try for 4 questions, maybe. Yes. Thank you. You're right.
Okay, can you...
We'll take the question. Yeah. Sorry.
For the professor, my name is Gordana Novakovic. I'm from Novi Sad, Serbia. I'm very triggered by this session. In a good way, you all know by now I love fire. And I feel fire right now. Yes, Istok, I know. Anyways, I have something to trigger you, maybe. Our countries right now benefit from the fact that we don't have critical thinking at all. It's easier to control a nation if we don't have critical thinking. That's why, at least in Serbia, investments in education are really poor. Science, non-existent. Those charts, again, they're not reflective of you. Those are some facts. I find funny, my sister is a badass scientist, but she has to work in Switzerland because that's how poor our science is. That's one thing. The second, in my opinion, there are 3 pillars of every society. Our teachers who educate us, our doctors who cure us, and our judges who protect us. I sound like a socialist. Heritage. If these 3 are not strong, everything is wrong. Corrupted healthcare system, corrupted judges means no education. So how are we working on bringing the economy up if our teachers can't feed their children by the end of every month, because that's how poorly they're paid? That's my thing. I would love to invest in education. That's why non-formal education for me is really important. But right now, I really don't see the solution in these corrupted lives that we are living at the moment. That's it. Thank you.
That's to Helena, and then more, and you two, and then we'll finish.
Hello. Okay. So first, I would just like to correct a statement that was made in relation to the Finnish school system. Actually, they work in projects and they incorporate technology in their projects. Secondly, I would like to ask, in a globalized world, which you actually mentioned about globalization, where the development of economy is highly dependent on technology and innovation, I want to ask, does Europe want to stay behind? Because if we don't continue investing in technology and innovation, that's what's going to happen. So this is my question. Thank you. So we are living in a globalized world, right, where the development of economy is highly dependent on technology and innovation. They are highly correlated. And the more China, for example, and India advance, I want to ask, does Europe want to stay behind in terms of economy and innovation? Thank you.
We could go behind, up behind. No, go back with the mic first, and then on the right side we have two questions, and then we'll finish. But there will be a lot of place for discussion within the workshops, which I'm sure will be very energetic.
Hello. Mic check. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there we go. So my name is Nikolai, and I think that you guys didn't answer one of the most important questions that Tale posted. This is quality versus quantity. Because in Bulgaria, we have more places in universities than there are actual students graduating from high school. And the thing is, in Bulgaria, if you go to an exam at some schools, at some universities, they just tell you if you want just a pass, you can leave the room and that's it. So it seems to me that maybe it's different in other countries, but in Bulgaria I have many friends who go to universities and they don't study at all. You just go to the exams, you pass, you read a little bit, and that's it. And the second thing is, on the point that Goran made, it's not impossible to go to a good school. I worked my ass off, I managed to pay my fees, and I went to Russell Square University. And there are many people on scholarships there from poor countries who do it, and it's totally wrong to tell people that they can't do it. They just need motivation and to believe in themselves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. For the next two. I would, could you pass the mic to the right for two more? I would encourage our speakers, because we're limited on time, to simply respond to questions at this point, because we're so limited in time. There will be a lot of place for discussions. But I would like to also encourage all of us to raise a bit our culture of panel versus workshop. There is a place for a lot of self-expression and a lot of mutual communication, and there is a place where we have a few panelists which we can get the most out of this experience with simple, concise, inquisitive questions. But we're anyhow finishing, so please, the next two ones.
I'm Mary. I come from Greece. I really cherished what I heard from all the speakers and also from the people, from the audience. And I would like to focus on the fact that, as I see in other countries as well, and not only in my reality in Greece, there is this disconnection between what we're taught at school and what is expected from us, from the labor market, from the reality. And I tend to think that Balkans are like, let's say, a separate world from the Western world. And we don't acquire at school not only the skills, but also the competences to make us, let's say, successful in the labor market or in the academic world. At the second level, I would like also to stress something, my concern about the rise of radicalism and extremism in the Balkans. And I think that this is very much connected with education and also with the fact that the young people are trying to find a goal, they're trying to find their niche in the world. And at least in my country, in Greece, there is a big connection with education and religion. We have a ministry, which is a Ministry of Education and Religious Affairs. For me, this is something which raises concern in the fact that religious leaders are actually the ones who, let's say, control what we learn and how we learn it. And please be aware that I'm not putting any religious dogma on this, because I think that this is beyond, let's say, credos and everything. So being a practical person, I come to what we can do. I don't think that the educational system, the formal educational system, can change easily, because I see it as a very slow-moving machine. However, what we could do is, let's say, bring non-formal education closer to the formal system, in the sense that these skills and attitudes and competencies that are very valuable in the labor market, but also in real life as well, are something that can be acquired through non-formal education. And the thing is that in this kind of meetings, what we see is most of the times the same people who come from NGOs only. These meetings sometimes are close to, let's say, formal education institutions. You have to belong to an NGO in order to attend. They are close to teachers most of the times. You have to be either a youth worker or you're a youth leader and all that. So it's like non-formal education also, let's say, closes its door to formal education and vice versa. And also schools, which see us, let's say, as second category trainers, as not good enough or as not smart or as not academic enough. So I would very much suggest the close collaboration between the two so that we can gain the one from the other. I don't have a question.
Okay, there's a comment. It's a good comment. We'll have one more comment question, and then we will leave the floor for the speakers to respond, reply, whatever they would like, because we're constrained on time. But it's wonderful to hear every comment and question that can be later on mobilized within the framework of workshops. Thank you.
Okay. Is it on? Yes. Okay. It was very interesting to see about the research laboratories, and I think that yes, we really need them, and in Macedonia. But I'm really concerned. We have also Manu. We have many strategies made, which unfortunately are not implemented. So what if we just produce again new things, but they're not again implemented? We can see that the professors and teachers and they are not really enough loud. Unfortunately, I cannot see many professors out in the TV at the debates discussing about the education system. I'm really happy that you are here and we are discussing together, but I would, it's honestly, it's a problem. And I see problem from the primary education, how the teachers are selected. For me, we speak about Finland, but Finland has the best teachers, best professors. And if we have this quality, I think that would be better. So my question is, how do we put in practice what we are speaking, first of all? And second question is, how we can increase the connection between formal and non-formal and informal education, because also in NGO we are trying to improve it, but if we don't have some connections, some better connections, then nothing will happen. I know that it's a wide question, but
thank you. Okay,
also one more thing. In Germany now, like they said, like it's the first discussion is how the university to become more practical. And what is the main discussion here in the universities here in Macedonia?
Thank you. There's a lot of content on the table, I feel. So these would be your final answers, reflections, and thoughts on the comments and questions. Who of you would like to start?
Is this on? Okay. I'd like to start again with Finland. Finland approves technology, but on the customized classes for technology, not on physics, not on maths, not on chemistry. So this is different. And we approve using our iPads, and I encourage to on the physics classes, because we don't have laboratories, but we have a virtual laboratory that we can use. So that is a completely different approach about Finland. And about my standpoint of view that we have to create a national laboratory, this is also, the numbers are speaking in favor of national laboratories, but there is an easy way to create a national laboratory in Macedonia. I believe in other ex-Yugoslav countries who are deprived from having those national laboratories. So the Ministry of Science is, in the last 10 years, a decade, supporting just targeted people and purchasing equipment for their labs. decisions were made in closed doors, I don't know how, and people are getting laboratory equipment. And I think this laboratory equipment can be collected from those awardees who has been awarded the equipment on unknown selection way and brought to a center of science, of natural sciences and technology, like the others, like Vinča, Ruđer Bošković, and Jožef Štefan, and create one of those centers where all the scientists from Macedonia will have the equal opportunity to carry research. So they will be financed by the government, the people who work there. There will be employees there, laboratory equipment who needs to cover their depreciation, and then renewal, and then materials to be covered, expenditure materials, and then each scientist from Macedonia to have equal opportunity to take part in research and to use the experimental equipment in that center. So this is kind of a socialistic idea of taking from the rich and like Robin Hood and putting in one place and allowing everyone who is interested to have the opportunity. The problem of equity is in education and in science unresolved until now, but could be easily resolved, to have free of charge higher education and to have free of access equipment to every scientist. I mean, Manu is not the good, Macedonian Academy of Sciences is Manu, is not a good place to talk about. I mean, this, we will discuss this later.
I'm sorry, we have to, but there will be space in the coffee breaks and
coffee break,
yeah. Thank you, Professor, for your concluding thoughts from the pillar of formal education side.
Okay. Oh, thank you. I mean, I was very moved by Gaca's comment. At first, that people who that in a way and this is what I was getting at in my speech, that the system is created not to create critical thinkers because they're the ones who are easier to control. So I second that and I agree with that. Teachers' pay is a very big problem in Bulgaria, something that is discussed a lot. Particularly, there's a lot of criticism about, not having competitive standards for teachers, and some people would say that the people who go into teaching are people who can't get into other majors. Which, probably there are some of these people, probably there are a lot who really, and there are really a lot of people who really passionately care about their work. Nikolai was talking about this issue of quality versus quantity, and I think that, what you described is a farce, when you go to the classroom and your professor just, gives you an excellent mark for showing up. As was also my experience sometimes at school, this is a farce. This is not education to me. And not to go for too long, but I think that everything else that was said in this round of question makes me realize that, we've lost belief in the power of education and what education, can do and how education, can move society. So I think that we need to raise our moral. We need to, this might sound cheesy, but we need to believe again, in the power of education, as an equalizing platform, as a platform for innovation, for progress. And I think that practically speaking, it's up to us to put pressure, to the higher ups, the stakeholders. Speaking of, bringing informal education into the formal classroom, I gave a lot of examples of how, teachers can do that, how how we can do that very practically, but also, you know, like we need to seek out these partnerships. You know, like when I went home like 2 months ago and did like the final preparations for Immersion Academy, I found that actually, you know, like schools and like principals are very open to working with, you know, like young people, with young organizations. And I don't want to say that, you know, like perhaps they're not approached. The system, you know, like is very slow. You know, like you need to be really patient. But there are people, you know, like who are open to these kind of partnerships, and that's, I think, a great opportunity and a practical way to move forward.
Just very briefly, as I said at the beginning, I think, you know, education is, you know, the only thing that can economically and prosper and move a nation and generation. I just think it just needs to change in terms of the implementation of education and how we operate, and that's why I'm a huge advocate for non-formal education. I do believe there needs to be some collaboration between non-formal education and business and establish that as institutions. However, there needs to be alignment. So in terms of the objectives and what a lot of things within education, as we've been hearing, that there's a lot of political agendas. And so it's important that we get the right people educated to enter these political positions, to then change the political system so we can move and make progress. And yeah, and I also feel there needs to be a kind of pedagogical approach to education. It can't be the same as normal. And we're in a moving world where technology and the world of business is changing, and so too does education. It needs to change so that the right people can adapt and move in as well. Thank you.
No, yes, okay. I'd like to say a great thank you to all our speakers on the panel. I believe it elicited a lot of emotional responses from a lot of you, which I think it's so wonderful that now we have the opportunity in the framework of the workshops that will continue after the break to be mobilized, and may they be wonderful thoughts or deep frustrations, but to use them to together think about steps moving forward. I would ask for one big applause and thank you for all our speakers. For opening today's day with this important topic and discussion. Thank you. And thank you all.